All right, strap in, everyone. Today, we're going deep on Bitcoin. And let's just say, there are some serious waves crashing around right now. We've got Wall Street titans wading in, whispers of quantum threats spooking the market, and even, get this, tech giants are pumping the brakes a bit. It's a lot to digest, but hey, that's what this deep dive is all about, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It seems like every time you blink, there's a new Bitcoin headline screaming for attention. And trying to figure out what actually matters, well, it can make your head spin, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off with BlackRock.
Yeah.
You know, the asset management giant.
Right.
They've been quietly pulling back on their Bitcoin ETF contracts. And that's got everyone scratching their heads. Because, I mean, Bitcoin has been a rocket ship, at least, potentially. You'd think they'd be doubling down, not backing away. What's your take on this?
Well, it's definitely interesting, and I think it shows you the difference between how these big institutions, like BlackRock, how they look at the market,
Versus,
compared to, say, your average Bitcoin enthusiast. A lot of individual investors, they're playing the long game, the whole Ocho DL mentality.
Right.
But these institutions, they're all about short-term gains. They're like sharks, constantly sniffing out the next opportunity.
So is BlackRock waving goodbye to Bitcoin then? Or is this like a strategic retreat?
Hard to say for certain. It could be a bunch of things, really. Maybe they're rebalancing their portfolio. Or, who knows, they might have some insider info we don't.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure. Their move has sent ripples through the market.
Yeah, it's making some folks nervous. Kind of like, when you're swimming in the ocean and you see a school of fish suddenly dart in the other direction.
Exactly.
You can't help but wonder, uh-oh, did they see a shark? Should I be getting out of here?
That's a perfect analogy. And to add to that whole underwater thriller vibe, we've got this undercurrent of anxiety about quantum computing.
Ah, yes. The quantum apocalypse, as some are calling it.
Right.
This idea that these supercomputers, they could crack Bitcoin's code and bring the whole thing crashing down. How much should we be freaking out about this? I mean, is this tomorrow's problem or is it way off in the future?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And honestly, nobody really knows for sure. Quantum computers, they're still in their early stages, but the potential is mind-blowing. Think about it. A computer that can solve problems in seconds. Problems that would take our best computers, years, maybe even decades.
Okay, yeah, that is kind of scary when you put it like that.
Yeah, so it's understandable why people are getting spooked. I mean, if some bad actor got their hands on a powerful enough quantum computer, they could theoretically mess with Bitcoin's security.
Right.
But here's the thing. The Bitcoin community, they're not ignoring this threat. They're actively working on solutions to make Bitcoin quantum resistant.
Okay, so maybe we can breathe a little easier, at least for now. But then we have this other head scratcher. Microsoft. Now, you'd think a tech giant like that, they'd be all over Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But they're shareholders. They just shot down a proposal to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet.
They did.
Which seems like a huge missed opportunity, especially when you see other big tech companies, like Tesla, jumping in with both feet. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise. Especially for a company like Microsoft, known for pushing boundaries.
Right.
One possibility is that their shareholders, they're just more risk-averse compared to, say, Tesla's investors. Or maybe Microsoft itself is being extra cautious, with all the regulatory uncertainty surrounding Bitcoin.
That makes sense. And, I mean, let's be honest, Bitcoin can be pretty volatile.
Oh, absolutely.
So does this Microsoft move, does it signal that Bitcoin isn't going mainstream? If a company like Microsoft isn't ready to jump on board, what does that say to the average person who's thinking about dipping their toes into crypto?
It definitely raises some questions about mainstream adoption, that's for sure. It's like, if Microsoft isn't convinced, maybe I should hold off too.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you wonder.
It does.
That's
You have to remember, though, adoption by these big institutions, it usually lags behind. They tend to be more hesitant. Especially with something as, revolutionary as Bitcoin.
Right. So maybe this isn't a giant red flag. Maybe it's just a sign that Bitcoin is still figuring things out.
Yeah, exactly. It's still blazing its own trail. And there are bound to be bumps along the way.
For sure.
And speaking of bumps, let's not forget about the fallout from all this news. We're seeing a wave of Bitcoin sell-offs. Some investors, they're getting spooked by BlackRock's move, the quantum computing fears. And then you throw in Microsoft's hesitation on top of that. It's really putting that whole Osho DL philosophy to the test.
Yeah, for the average investor, the one who bought into Bitcoin as like a long-term store of value, this market turmoil has got to be, well, unsettling.
Oh, absolutely. It forces you to confront the psychology of investing. Like, how much do you really believe in Bitcoin? Are you swayed by what these big institutions are doing? These are questions every investor has to grapple with.
It's like a tug of war, isn't it? On one side, you have the die-hard Bitcoin believers,
Right.
committed to decentralization, disrupting traditional finance.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you've got these giants stepping into the ring. Maybe they'll bring more stability, more liquidity.
Potentially.
But there's also that fear, the fear of control, of manipulation.
Exactly. And just when you thought this story couldn't get any wilder, we have Goldman Sachs. You know, Wall Street itself diving headfirst into crypto market making.
Oh, hold on. Now, this is where things get really interesting. For those who might not be familiar with market making, can you break it down for us? What does it mean and why is it a big deal?
Sure, sure. Imagine a market like a bustling marketplace, but instead of fruits and vegetables, we're trading Bitcoin.
Okay, got it.
Market makers like Goldman Sachs, they act like intermediaries. They're constantly buying and selling Bitcoin, making sure there's always someone to trade with.
So they're like the oil that keeps the engine running smoothly.
In a way, yes. And their entry into the crypto space, well, it could mean more stability, more volume for the market.
So more players, more money flowing through. It sounds like a good thing, right? More stability, less of those wild price swings.
It could be. But there's another side to this coin.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Some people worry that more Wall Street involvement, it could lead to more centralization and potentially even manipulation of the market.
Right, because the whole idea behind Bitcoin was to create a decentralized system free from the control of big banks and governments.
Exactly. So Goldman Sachs stepping in, it's both exciting and, well, a bit unsettling.
It really is. I mean, will they play by Bitcoin's rules? Or will they try to bend the game to their advantage?
That's the big question.
It is. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's zoom out for a second. What does all of this mean for the future of Bitcoin? Is it on its way to becoming mainstream? Or is it going to stay a volatile playground for speculators?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if I had a crystal ball, I'd tell you. But the truth is, nobody knows for sure. But it sure makes things interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. It feels like we're at a crossroads with Bitcoin, like the moves these big players are making. BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, they could shape things for years to come.
Absolutely. That's what makes this space so fascinating.
It really is.
The stakes are high, the future is uncertain. It's like we're watching this tech and financial revolution happen right in front of us.
It is. It really is. So from everything we've talked about today, what's the one thing our listeners should take away from all this? What's the key takeaway?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that Bitcoin and, well, the whole crypto world, it's still very young.
Yeah, that's true.
We're seeing a new technology trying to find its footing, dealing with issues like scalability, regulations, trying to go mainstream.
It's not exactly a smooth ride, is it?
Not exactly, but that also means there's a ton of opportunity.
That's a good point.
And I think the key for any investor, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, is to be a little skeptical, do your homework, and really understand the risks.
Makes sense. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think instead of asking if Wall Street will embrace Bitcoin, maybe the better question is how will Bitcoin change Wall Street?
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, this technology was born out of a desire for decentralization, for transparency. Could it actually end up reshaping the very institutions it was meant to disrupt?
That's a great question. It really flips the script, doesn't it? It's not just about Bitcoin fitting in. It's about Bitcoin potentially changing the entire game.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so exciting, so unpredictable. The story's still being written, and we all have a front row seat.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today. It's clear that the world of Bitcoin is anything but boring. We'll be keeping an eye on all the latest developments, and we'll be back with more insights soon. Until then, stay curious and keep those portfolios diversified.